Hey, Alexandria, welcome to the show.
Hello, Brittany. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so
It
excited to be here.
is a pleasure to have you. We just found out that our Fem Health Fellow, who is our podcast producer, Alexa, was an angel investor in your company. That is so cool.
I'm pretty speechless right now. It's incredible, and I'm honored.
I love the power of crowdfunding and angel investing because it's really allowing women to put money into products that they either want themselves or they really believe in.
It is so true. It's a very, very powerful force multiplier.
Yep, absolutely. It's actually one of the main drivers of femtech that we've found is that women in finance is one of the biggest,
Mm.
reasons for the growth of femtech because of the number of angel investments being made by women into the women health companies. Do you have a lot of female investors?
We do, and we have a lot of male investors, which may surprise people or not surprise people, given that it's femtech or kind of women's health and broader health. But I think this is a topic that appeals to both sides of the equation and all sorts of reproductive constructs. So I've been really excited to see that there's interest on both the male and the female side.
Definitely. Well, let's kick off this interview learning more about you. Our listeners always want to know more about the guest in terms of what's your background, What did you study? What did you do before? And what made you jump into entrepreneurship?
Yep, absolutely. So I actually was a woman of finance. So I started my
Mm.
early career in the corporate world. I was an investment banker first, then a management consultant for a bunch of years. I spent about a decade in the corporate world, and then I went back to school. I got my MBA at Harvard, and at that point, I had known that I really wanted to. I was working as a healthcare consultant, so I knew that I wanted to stay in healthcare, but I wanted to switch from what I felt was a more reactive model of healthcare to a more proactive model of
Mm.
healthcare. And so that was the impetus for me to also get my master's in nutrition. And so I did that part time while I was at Harvard. And then I left the corporate world completely to see clients one on one. And at that point, everyone was like, "What exactly are you doing? You just got your MBA and now you're working as a nutritionist one on one. What's the plan?" And at the time, I really wanted to be on the front lines. I knew that there was so much opportunity in healthcare and wellness, but I really felt that it was important for me to be sitting in the clinician seat to actually understand it from that perspective. So I spent a bunch of years doing that. And then that was when I kind of came face to face with the challenges that we have in our landscape around fertility, or should I say infertility. And that was the impetus for certainly for starting Poplin and for writing my book.
What is your connection to nutrition? Have you always been a nutrition advocate, or was there something that kind of sparked nutrition versus maybe physical exercise or some
Mm.
other kind of coaching thing that has to do with wellness?
Yeah, so I've tried all the things. I'm was certified as a yoga teacher, a personal trainer, have my master's in nutrition. So I've kind of tested a lot of the modalities.
Yeah.
And I think what I found was I wanted it to be exercise. I wanted that to be the domino. But I think really in my own journey and also in many journeys, I think I found out that I was lactose intolerant when
Mm.
I was in college. And I come from an Italian family
Mm.
that, love is food, food is love. And so food, was such a central part of my experience. And I found out that it was making the food that I was eating was making me sick.
Mm.
And so that journey was an interesting one and one I rebelled a lot around until I came to terms with. But through that experience of, experimenting with taking dairy out of my diet, I realized, wow, I had no idea how good I could feel in my own body without something that wasn't working for me. And that was the first doorway into understanding the power of nutrition on our moods, on how we physically feel, on our performance, on our cognition, so many different things. And so that was the opening for me. And then I went even further into kind of what is the biochemistry of nutrition, and then certainly into functional medicine. And there's all these parts that now come together in the work that I do. But that was the opening for me.
Mm. You can have gluten, right?
I can have it. That is
Okay,
true.
man, because if you were an Italian family and you couldn't have mozzarella or pasta, man, that would be tough. That would be really tough. So tell us, what is Poplin?
Poplin is the first pre-pregnancy wellness company. And so what that means is that we help people, whether they're individuals or couples, get ready to get pregnant in much the same way that we'd prepare for any other major milestone in life, whether that's a wedding or a career even buying a house today has more infrastructure and support than getting pregnant does. And so the way that we do it is we start with figuring out your pre-pregnancy wellness baseline through diagnostic testing. And so I'm sure we'll spend a lot of time talking about what that is. But just like there are KPIs for business, which is the world that I came from, we can look at KPIs for our health. And so that's what we're doing here is what are the KPIs for our health that we know can have a potential influence on the ability to get pregnant and the health of that pregnancy and baby.
Well, yeah, why should women and couples care about preconception health?
It's such a foundational question. So proper preconception care has two big benefits, right? First is it makes it easier to get pregnant, but then it also increases the likelihood of having a healthy pregnancy and baby. And the reason for that is because the health of both parents is what sets the stage for the egg health and sperm health, right? Which then come together and set the stage epigenetically for that future child. So you have a lot of factors at play. And so what the individuals are doing in the 3, 6, 12 months prior to conception is actually what sets the stage for the lifelong trajectory of that child's health. And it can affect, very, very diverse things like propensity towards diabetes, mood disorders. There's a variety of studies that are coming out now to show how profound these impacts can be. And so I think we've had this information for 40 plus years. And there have been preconception guidelines for a very long time. But what I am so passionate about is that they're not being filtered into people's experience, right? People are not being given the option for preconception visits. They don't even know that preconception exists and that there's this important period. We kind of go from trying not to get pregnant to being pregnant, but there's intervening period we just completely forget about. And so I think it's really, preconception is having, I hope it's heyday now. And I hope we are kind of leading the charge in its importance and why it's important.
Yeah. How old is the history of preconception? Like, when did people actually start to consider this?
So, I mean, there are actually many ancient tribes have preconception rituals. So one great example is the Maasai tribes had these rituals where basically they would give couples who were recently married milk from the wet season, assuming that was more nutrient dense. So they would get the first chance at having this milk. And there's examples like this in history, but we kind of forgot it for a while, right? I think that's like a lot of traditions, particularly when it comes to fertility rituals. We've forgotten a lot of the ancient wisdom. About 40 years ago or so, right, we had guidelines that came out and said, okay, preconception health is really important, around the 80s. And then they kind of went quiet again. And so I think we've struggled to figure out the best implementation for these measures, but the importance has not gone away.
So you said that preconception health can help get you pregnant and help, maybe ward off infertility. Can you kind of walk us through that? What is the biology behind that? How is that? Give us some case studies as to,
Yes.
What could be wrong with your health that's leading to infertility and how you could, prevent that issue from coming up.
Yep. So this is exactly how I came into this space. So I was working as a nutritionist and I was in a variety of different settings. And I was having a lot of clients coming to me who are struggling to conceive. And friends, by the way, right? Over coffee, over tea, people were grabbing me and saying, I'm willing to do anything. I'm willing to pay anything, but nobody can tell me what to do. And I was so struck by that. I was like, this seems like a solvable, it's an important problem, A, but it also seems like a solvable problem. I can't figure out what's going on here. So, and this was around the time where I was starting to do my functional medicine training. So, kind of like digging really deep into the detective work of what is going on with someone's health. And so I started running these really broad panels based on the science that I was seeing around all the factors that we know can interfere with fertility. And my clients were the results I got were, lighting up all over the place with things that their doctor had never even looked at. And so I realized, wow, like, why are we waiting until someone is struggling to conceive to look at these things? And, I dropped a lot of parallels to what I did as a consultant because that was my background. So as a consultant, you go into a new client and the first thing you do is run a diagnostic. You don't start giving recommendations. You look at their data and their information, and then you give recommendations, right? So I was just struck, why are we not doing this in health? Why are we just like looking at someone, maybe sizing them up and saying, oh, well, I think you should be this, right? And in healthcare today, like all 30-year-olds are created equal, all 35-year-olds are created equal, especially in fertility. But cellularly, they're vastly different most of the time. So it was just a very incomplete way of looking at the health system. And so I realized, well, the clinical literature is pretty clear. Like we have lots of data on how nutrient deficiencies can interfere with time to pregnancy, how inflammation can interfere with time to pregnancy, how metabolic dysfunction can increase time to pregnancy, and so forth, how it can affect mostly sperm health, but there's indications also, kind of that it can affect egg health. And so I just dove in and I realized that there's so many things that we can actually measure. So most of the time, fertility is treated as like below the waist conversation, right? It's just about your reproductive organs and your hormones, which is true. But our philosophy is that fertility is an extension of your overall health.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to measure your whole health. And so what we're looking at is we're looking at 10 times the number of biomarkers as other fertility companies out there because of that. So we are looking at hormones and a much larger set of hormones, but we're also looking at hormone binding globulins, and we're also looking at things that can affect hormone signaling, right? Like inflammation in your body. And so we're looking at a bunch of different categories: blood status, hormone status, metabolic status, nutrient status, and immune status. And that gives us a much bigger picture to look at. And so what we're seeing is, because of that, 80% of the time we're seeing indications of a chronic health condition that someone wasn't aware of. Over 80% of the time, we're seeing profound nutrient deficiencies. About half of the time, we're seeing hormonal imbalance. 60% of the time, we're seeing inflammation, elevated inflammation rate. All of these things can interfere with ability to get pregnant. And these are in people who are planning to conceive.
And they feel healthy, like they don't know that they're sick or deficient.
Oh, I love this question. So this is the crux. Yes, most people have no specific symptoms, right? They're doing this as a, I want to see where I stand. And certainly that's what we're putting out there. And, this is the thing that people don't understand as well, which is, what do you think the most common thing that people use as a barometer for their health?
Their weight.
Yeah, weight. It's usually I get weight or how I feel.
Yeah, oh, I was
Right?
gonna say how you feel, and I was like, well, is that a metric? That's
Yeah.
kind of quantitative, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's a decent metric, but it's a lagging indicator. Because if
Mm-hmm.
you look at the disease process, symptoms don't come until like the last, maybe 30% of the full disease process. So if you're waiting to have symptoms, you're already pretty far into that disease process. So what I say is, let's not wait till there's symptoms, especially in a profound time period such as this in preconception, where not only is it affecting your health, but it's affecting the health of your future child. That's when we really want to look physiologically, because you'll see physiologic changes like blood changes and urine changes much earlier than you experience symptoms. So a lot of people are not experiencing overt symptoms, or they think what they are experiencing is normal.
Yeah, they
So
got
that's another
normalized
piece
to
of
it
this
because
too.
they've been deficient for so long. Yeah, I found out last year that I have a gluten intolerance, and my symptom that got me to do a elimination diet was joint pain. But when I
Mm.
finally figured out it was gluten and eliminated it, there was a bunch of other stuff that I didn't realize I was dealing with that actually had to do with the gluten. So I thought I was someone who needed 9 hours of sleep, and I kind of hated that about myself. I'm like, I want to work
Mm.
harder, I want to stay out longer, I want to get up earlier. Well, turns out without the gluten, I can wake up at 8 hours and feel super refreshed, And so it was like there was this fatigue, and yeah, so there were a lot of interesting stuff that I just got used to and didn't realize it was that.
That's an incredible example.
What kind of nutrient deficient, give us an example of a nutrient deficiency that would affect fertility?
Hmm. So the most common ones we see are vitamin D, omega-3s, and iron.
Hmm.
And
And how
all
did those affect fertility? Is it like the egg isn't ovulating, or there's a hormone imbalance and so it's not implanting, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different pieces to this. So, with omega-3s, I'll take that as an example. So omega-3s are, fatty acids, and they comprise, all of our cells. And so one of the things that's really helpful is you can, it's like the construction of your cells. If you have poor construction, the implication is that you have shitty communication, right? So if your cells don't have good cellular membranes, they're not able to communicate with one another as easily. And so the signals might get lost, right? And that's where you might have, okay, well, our cells are sending the signal out, we need more hormone, but the other cells are not hearing it, for example. So this is where you can get overproduction or underproduction of hormones. That's just one example. But all hormones are interconnected to one another. And so, one impact can have a domino effect on many others.
And that's the same for sperm in men. There could be a nutrient deficiency that's affecting a hormone cycle that affects the sperm production or mobility.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Well, so I know that 50%, as so what I've heard, is 50% of pregnancies in the United States are unplanned or mistimed. The other 50% are those people that are like scheduling this and wanting to get pregnant.
Yeah.
I'm presuming is the opposite. Okay. And so those 50%, they should all be thinking about preconception. If they're trying to plan it, they're trying to time it, they should be also involved in preconception care, right?
Mm-hmm. So I actually heard new stats, and they came out, I think, fairly recently, but I think it's like less than 40% now are not planning. And so I think that's, interesting, because I think we are getting to a point now where certainly where in the public discourse, and certainly with platforms like yours, we're talking more about these topics.
Yeah.
Where, we're trying to bring them into the light. And so people's awareness of infertility and, having friends, coworkers, family who are struggling with this brings people's awareness up. And so I think, I talk about reproductive anxiety. Reproductive anxiety has increased meaningfully, right? Which is our worry about getting pregnant, sustaining a pregnancy, having a healthy pregnancy, regardless of our personal or family health history. That's going up. So I think there's, so much more attention being paid to this topic, that people are changing their behavior around it. And we also just have to face the facts that we're not in the same environment as our grandparents and great grandparents, right? The epidemic of infertility that we are now experiencing was not present, 50 to 100 years ago. And that's largely because our genes are mismatched to our environment. Our environment has changed. The way that we eat, the way that we move, the stress level, the environmental chemicals that we're exposed to, so much so in the last 50 to 100 years, and our genes cannot keep pace. We have epigenetic changes, but we're not able to keep pace with those changes. And one of the unfortunate effects of these environmental changes is impaired fertility.
What would the process look like using Poplin? If I was to use it, what is kind of the process? What could someone expect?
So we tried to make it as convenient and seamless as possible. You can go onto our website and you can order one of our test panels. We have a test panel for males and we have a test panel for females. So regardless of what your relationship construct looks like, there are options available to you. And regardless of where you are in the journey. So whether that's, I want to get pregnant yesterday, I want to get pregnant 3 months from now, or 3 years from now, or if you're undergoing assisted reproductive tech, whether that's egg freezing or IUI or IVF, right? These, there's options for, for you to get information across all of those different.
Oh yeah, because maybe taking your test would be helpful for someone who wants to do egg freezing to increase your quality of eggs that are going to get frozen. Interesting. Didn't think about that.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So the preparatory period applies across all, whether you're naturally getting pregnant or whether you're, using any sort of intervention, right? Because the foundation is still the same, egg health and sperm health. And we're trying to optimize both of those. So you order one of your tests, and then you would either go to a local lab or you would have a lab tech come to you. That's up to you. It is a blood draw. It is not a blood spot. We are testing 70 plus, 70 biomarkers. It's impossible to do that currently with just a finger prick. So you need to have your blood drawn, but we make it pretty seamless. And then the blood will be processed by the lab and you'll get a notification that says your results are ready. You can log into our web platform and there you'll see your results. And it will say for each marker, it says like, this is what it means. And you hear the implications. And then you can have a call with one of our pre-pregnancy educators to review the results. We get incredible feedback on these review calls. Like it just demystifies the whole process. And that's where you can start to come up with a game plan for next steps. So whether that's, initiating supplementation because, you have very clear indications of nutrient deficiencies, or meeting with your doctor because, we're seeing a lot of early indications of autoimmune conditions. And so you may need to do follow-up testing with your doctor. You may uncover something around thyroid function that suggests that medication may be needed. So follow up with your doctor to make sure that you can initiate that conversation with them. Or, there's things around metabolic dysfunction where you can upgrade your diet. There's, so many things that you can modify through diet and lifestyle and supplementation, sometimes medications and procedures, but certainly you're giving yourself the gift of time doing this early so that you have all of these options and they're unique to you, not some proverbial 35-year-old.
Yeah. And I know everyone's going to be different and every case and molecule is different, but kind of in general, if someone was, oh, I'm deficient in this, I need to take vitamin D, let's say. How long does it typically take for taking a daily supplement to actually change your biology and improve your chances? So, if I was to do egg freezing, like you said, right, as an example, and I was vitamin D deficient, I start taking a vitamin D supplement every day. Is it going to be like 3 months, 6 months, 2 years? How long do supplements take to affect your biology?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. It's highly individualistic and it, certainly depends on your starting point.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, I usually use 3 months as a decent guide because that's how, oftentimes how long it takes for you to make the change, for your cells to reflect the change. And then also that's for sperm development, that's about the time for the sperm development cycle. And it's the last stage of egg maturation as well. So egg maturation from kind of waking up, the eggs waking up from their like sleeping beauty like state where they start to divide again, right, to when they're being ovulated, that's about a year. But that last 3, maybe 4 month period is the time where they're most susceptible, both positively and negatively to the world around them. So what you're eating, your stress levels, your environment. So that's the period of time that you ideally want to be intervening in. And, certainly depending on your starting point, you may need multiple of these kind of 3 month cycles. But at minimum, I usually say, okay, probably want to look at a 3 month cycle, and you can certainly retest to see where you are and, if you're trending in the right direction.
Of course, now I'm thinking about like, well, dang, if you get pregnant in February, all that holiday drinking, or stress, holiday travel stress is affecting your egg or sperm. But I was recently joking about timing your pregnancy for childcare expenses. My sister has a son with a birthday in November. And I was like, damn, Sabrina, if you just had him like 6 weeks earlier, you could save like $24,000 in preschool, like fees, because he would be able to go to kindergarten, a year earlier. But I'm like, that's an American problem. We have to time our pregnancy and childbirth based on childcare expenses. Well, you recently wrote a book. So awesome. 9 months is not enough. Tell us a little bit about why you wrote it. What's the book about? How people can get it?
Oh, this book is an incredible labor of love. I really, after having worked with a lot of clients, I was pretty incensed about the status quo. And I think that's something we might share. um, and I built a business around it, but not everyone is going to be a Poplin customer. And I certainly understand and acknowledge that. And I think that the consumer education side of preconception is incredibly important, and it's not being addressed often enough. And so whether or not someone ultimately, becomes a Poplin customer or not, I wanted people to have access to this information that I didn't know 6 or 7 years ago, kind of when I started this journey. And I had 2 master's degrees at the time. So I was incredibly humbled by how much I didn't know about my own damn body. And, I wanted other people to know this. And, that you have so much more agency over your reproductive health than you've been told. And I felt that there was a huge gap around understanding why it's important and then how to even go about doing it. Like there's, hundreds and hundreds of checklists for, a wedding, how to plan a wedding, but there's not a single one for how to prepare to get pregnant. And I just felt that there was a huge gap for that. And look, we can't plan for everything. I mean, I'm relatively type A. I like my plans. I like my checklist. And even I acknowledge, like, we're not going to cover every eventuality. That is not the goal here. But I wanted a reference guide, right? If you want to optimize your chances of getting pregnant with a healthy baby on your terms and on your timeline, what the heck can you be doing?
Yeah.
And I think we treat pregnancy as this like mythical and magical process that we have no control over. And it is magical and it is incredibly beautiful. It is also scientific, right? So we know the inputs. We know it's good egg and good sperm and appropriate timing and a welcoming uterine environment, right? And if you optimize those variables, you meaningfully increase the likelihood of your success. And so I just thought there was an opportunity to really give people the information and then they get to decide. what the trade-offs are, what the balance is, and how to do it, rather than, me telling them what to do. Give them the information, and then they can decide how they want to implement it for themselves and their future family.
Yesterday we have a Fem Health Fellowship program where we have, interns and fellows at our company and helping with things and learning. And we do a monthly webinar where I teach them about femtech. And yesterday we did the femtech landscape, talking about innovation and stuff. And somebody asked, like, why aren't there more startups that are just doing sexual education? Because it seems like, first of all, these women don't even know that something's wrong. So they don't know they need a solution. And also they feel ashamed of their bodies. They don't know it's normal or common or that they could do something. So why don't we see more education companies? And I said, well, first of all, there's like business models and legalities of states and what you're allowed to say to children and such. I said, but honestly, it's the founders. Femtech founders are leading the charge in educating women. I said, they're not only business people and leading the charge and being technical and building amazing apps or devices or medical tools or, programs and services, but they're also educating the masses. One, it's because you guys have to, because otherwise, how are you going to get clients, right? How are you going to get women to buy your stuff when they don't know they even need it? But y'all are really holding up the torch of education. And I think your book is like a perfect example of that, where you're like, I'm running a startup. I also published a book because yes, it's like, for me, I see it as it's parendicular. It's helpful to your business, but it's also just on its own, a helpful book in Barnes and Noble that isn't necessarily a website that's poplin.com. Right. So, yeah, I love that. Well, how long has it been in the market for? What feedback have you gotten on the book?
It's been really amazing. I mean, I think writing a book it tends to be a more solo journey. And so, kind of was in my own, world writing after having worked with, lots and lots of clients. And so it's the first time that I've actually had a chance to get, feedback from people on this approach. And I've just been really humbled by it, right? People sharing that, like, they're highlighting nearly every page, and that they feel so empowered by what they're learning, and like why isn't my PCP telling me about this? And I am so excited about the beginning of this movement. People are sharing it with their friends, their family, their coworkers, right? Just like this is, saying it's like a must read, and that is so cool, because it means that I'm not the one who's carrying the torch anymore. Other people are too.
That's
And
right.
that's how we're going to really make change, is other people get activated, right? I got activated, and now other people are activated, and they'll kind of carry it on.
So who should read this book?
Hmm. It's really for anyone who wants to have children or thinks they want to have children, regardless of what that timeline is. Or if you're, not you're past your reproductive age, but you want to support someone who's, on their journey or near their journey. And so it's, as I was mentioning earlier, right? Like, I think it could be, if you're currently trying, if you're struggling, if you are like, I'm thinking about egg freezing, or I'm a couple years out. Or I would also say it's also relevant if you're not even sure that you want to have kids, because fertility is a marker of future health. And I don't think we talk about that enough. And so, right, having any sort of hormonal issue is a predictor often of fertility issues. And, hormonal issues and fertility issues are predictors of future health problems like cancer, metabolic dysfunction. They're often very interrelated. And so even if you're unsure whether children are in your future, this book gives a really good overview of all the things that, you can do in and around hormonal health, whether it's, optimizing your personal care products and your home care products and getting rid of the endocrine disruptors in your environment, or managing your stress and why that's relevant for healthy menstrual cycles, right? A lot of these things are, I think are basic knowledge for any female, who's walking around and really wants to optimize anything out of life.
9 months is not enough. We will put the link to the book in the notes for sure. But speaking of the future of hormone health and fertility, what do you think the future is for hormone health and fertility, both in terms of technology and societal attitudes?
Well, I think you alluded to one of the things, which is I I envision a world where, hormonal health literacy is part of basic health literacy,
Mhm.
and, understanding the menstrual cycle. I think that we have for far too long been told that just because symptoms are common, they are normal.
Mm.
and it's total nonsense. And, most women are struggling with some sort of premenstrual symptoms, whether that's breast tenderness or cramps or migraines or bloating. And those things often are, they're very common, but they're not normal, i.e. the way that your body was designed to operate. And so if you don't want to be dealing with those things, there is a path to not be dealing with those things. And I think it is invitation to be aware, right? I struggled with many things earlier on. And when I finally realized like, no, like that's not, it's not the sentence, right? It's not written as such. And you can do something about it. Sometimes it can take a while, and it's a lot of trial and error, and it requires patience, but just knowing that it's a possibility out there, I think is really important. And then I also think we're at a really cool stage with some of the tech that's coming out. There's incredible innovations coming down the pike around like the analysis of period blood. There's a whole bunch of stuff around novel diagnostics for early identification of disease stage, which I'm deeply passionate about, things like endometriosis. And then there's a whole host of things around personalized medicine, the continued evolution of epigenetic science that I think we're just scratching the surface on.
Yeah, I could see your tests evolving in the future where, once we figure out the biomarker for endometriosis, you're including that in your test, right? Or different biomarkers. And also what you said about, symptoms can be common, but it doesn't mean it's normal. And that they can be modified. I can't help but think of Funk It Wellness with Kate Morton. She does seed cycling. So she sells these seeds on subscription that you eat certain seeds during certain phases of your cycle to modify the typical symptoms of PMS. So yeah, using biohacking is a very, it's an up and coming, understanding our biology enough to modify it with natural things.
Yeah, and the one thing I would just say on this is, normal, I think I don't want people to think that there's something wrong with them if they are experiencing these things, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, there's so much judgment in this space and so much shame. And, you were talking about this a little bit earlier. And so what I just like, I think it's important to just understand normal as in scientifically normal in the sense that like, it's not, you don't have to settle for this if that is not what you desire. Your body does not have to be dealing with these certain things. And there are options like seed cycling is a great example. There's a lot of stuff that we can do whenever we have inflammatory stuff going on. It increases prostaglandins in our body, and that increases cramping. So just understanding some of those mechanisms are really helpful in and around cycles. Understanding the implications of elevated estrogen, right, and the symptomology that goes with it, I think is really, really important. So I would just say that as well. There's nothing wrong with you when I use the word normal, but it's an invitation to something else could be possible.
That's right. Our last question here, what is some of the biggest challenges you faced? I also would love to know what some of your biggest successes are, what keeps you going. So tell us first about a challenge and how you've overcame it.
Yeah, so I mean, building a new category is not for the faint of heart, right? And I would consider pre-pregnancy or preconception a new category, right? It is related to fertility, but is a very different way of building. And everyone kept asking me, investors particularly, when I was initially starting, why are you not focused on infertility, right? And I think there are an incredible swath of companies that are focused on this, right? Building, tech around improving ART cycles, building community around people who are suffering from infertility and, really need the cohort support. There's a ton of solutions. But I asked a different question, which is, why is infertility rising in the first place? And that is what I am focused on, is why. Why is this happening? So we can spend all day trying to address the problem, which is infertility, but what is the underlying cause of that problem? And that's actually what keeps me going, is because I, still do not think that is being sung from the rooftops enough. I don't see very many other people even asking this question. And, that is such an important one. And we're not going to solve this broader problem, which is it's not just a US problem, it's a global problem, if we don't start asking more first principles questions like that.
Well, I hope that they just threw money at you then. Wow, we didn't consider that, right? Preventative healthcare, what? And then, you just mentioned a little bit about why you keeps you going, but tell us another story about, a success or, what, fills your heart, what keeps you going.
Mm,
Because there's so many femtech founders listening to this, what's that they can relate to.
yeah. So I think I have this, early observation I made working in healthcare, which is that when we are sick, we focus inward on ourselves and healing ourselves. When we are well, we focus outward on sharing our gifts with the world, helping others. And if we look at the statistics of what's happening right now, a large percentage of the children being born today are being born, I'll say, quote unquote, sick, meaning they have a chronic health condition, the vast majority of them. And so what that means is that they are likely going to be more focused inward than previous generations on trying to heal themselves.
Mm.
And that robs the entire world of their gifts and their contributions. And so this to me is very macro and very meta, which is that it's our responsibility to help future generations be well so that they can contribute to the health of art and business and the planet and so forth. And that is very, very foundational.
I love this so much. I say that women are sure we're half the population, but we're responsible for 100%, right? We birth everybody. So what you're saying is, taking care of women's health is taking care of the future children, which is taking care of everybody.
Absolutely. And I think there's an opportunity too to move this beyond just a women's health conversation, right? I would say Poplin's not even just a women's health company or a femtech company. It involves both reproductive
Yeah.
partners. Biology doesn't care about this cultural construct that fertility is a female problem, right? It's a 50-50 biological equation.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
so I think we
Yep.
need to empower our, male reproductive partners to be in this conversation and contribute both like socially, i.e. I support you, I'm here alongside you, but then also biologically, like i.e. I am contributing my epigenetic material through sperm and it matters just as much as yours.
That's right. That's right. Well, Alexandria, this was awesome. I always love speaking with you. You are filled with knowledge. You're a great speaker. Can't wait to read your book. Everybody else should definitely get a copy as well and check out Poplin. Thank you.
Thank you so much.